Hi everyone, welcome back to the Bootcamp. In today's session, we're going to be picking up from where we left off in the last class. We made it all the way to step number 5 in the Jamstack serverless Git repo. So we'll start with step number 6 today, and then see how far we can get this.
Adil, why don't you start teaching step number 6? In the meanwhile, I'll just get warmed up. I'll just warm up all the stones.
Sure.
You know, the difficulty when I started Gatsby, the difficulty I was facing a little bit difficulty. Usually, when you are developing applications, web applications, and for the last 10, 15 years, I started off in Java, then went to .NET, and then to whatever. The point is, usually you think of thick clients. And when you are developing thick clients, you are basically Zeeshan doing client-side rendering. The main thing to keep in mind is each step as we go forward, we will discuss whether this thing will be rendered at build time or it will be rendered at runtime. In Gatsby, there are two distinct points in the development life cycle of a page. So therefore, anything which you do. Now, I know the first thing is people have difficulty in understanding even the build time, because I had also, to be honest. I don't know. I've not taken a poll of students. Developers like Daniyal and Zeeshan and Adil, they don't have this difficulty, but the average developer, because I was confused. And Daniyal and I started off together, Jamstack, and even Daniyal, he's a genius, but he made a mistake in the beginning, very beginning. He made a client-side route, and I won't say he was wrong, because what we wanted was to create pages dynamically. Remember, Daniyal, what happened?
Yes, sir. I exactly remember.
And what happened was Daniyal made a client-side route, as we do in React. And we thought we were making pages dynamically. Actually, we were making pages dynamically, but those pages was at runtime. We wanted to create pages at deploy time. But the problem was, at that stage, both I and Daniyal did not understand the difference between build time and runtime to that extent. So therefore, we were a bit confused. Why are they doing it the same thing two different ways? And remember, Daniyal, we were totally confused.
Yes, exactly, I remember, exactly.
So the point is, anything which you do, you are going to ask yourself the question, Zeeshan, whether it is build time or run time. That's the first question. Then we'll go forward. Adil, take over, please.
Okay. I'm just cloning a repo here. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so I've downloaded this repository here.
And before we go forward, one other thing. Today, this morning, a new book came out, Practical Jamstack, which I bought immediately. But the thing is that initially the books are not that good. The first chapter is very good, but the rest of the book is quite weak technically. Most probably the guy is a very renowned writer. He's a very good writer. But most probably because Gatsby and all these things are so new that he might have not had the time to get to first to market, the time to... It doesn't matter. We have already have the software. Just everybody read the first chapter of the book and we will go from there. Okay, Adil.
Okay, so last time we completed step number 5, so this one was completed. So I'm just going to start working in this step number 5. So I forked this repository, so I'm just going to be able to pick up from step number 5 as you had it. And then, so what we're trying to do in this step number 6, here's our step number 6 page in GitHub. So let's just look at the README here, see what we have to do. So we're trying to create a page dynamically. So that's the objective of this step, that in this step we want to create pages in our application using program. So in order to create the page dynamically, we need to do a couple of things. Um, and there's some links here as well. We can open them and go through these as well. So first one here, where does logic go on Jamstack sites, and build time versus runtime, build time and client runtime, data fetching, creating and modifying pages, and then there's a tutorial, and then there's a Node APIs link as well. And then these are just some of the quick steps that need to be done. So let's just quickly take a look at these pages, starting with this one. So the first question is, where does logic go on Jamstack sites? So if you look at this, there is a couple different places on where we can add the logic of our pages in the actual code. So option 1, they're saying you can write it into the HTML itself. So in this, what would happen is inside of the HTML code, you would have the logic written there directly. The option 2 here is if you write structured data and do logic at build time. So instead of writing HTML by hand, we would write it in a markdown file uh, to represent each event. So instead of having it inside the HTML file, we would have the logic in a markdown file, and then it would be the HTML would be built when we build the project. So,
A better way would be to say that you can write it down either in Markdown,
yeah,
or it can come from a headless CMS or some other place. The data can come from anywhere.
Yeah. So anything that's external to the actual HTML file, and then the when you develop the site, it would build the HTML. Okay, so that's option number 2. And then option number 3 is to do logic at the edge. So what is it saying? Edge workers are way of running code at the content delivery network.
Actually, this one is a tough one because we have not studied it yet. Netlify is working very hard to allow you to define logic at the edge device. Edge device is the node nearest to you. And right now we will overlook it, but this is an advanced technique that is just being implemented by AWS and Netlify.
Yeah.
So they are creating server out of CDNs.
Yes. That's right.
And then option number 4 here is to do the logic at the runtime. So this would be the JavaScript on the actual application, and then when the user accesses it, that's when the logic would execute when it loads. So then it asks you, where will you put the logic? And then the answer is, what is it saying? Although one of the core concepts is to do as much of it inside of the static HTML, because that's what we're trying to do, is have as much static as possible. And then, so the question is really, what is it saying? It depends what you're trying to do again. So as much as you can do it inside of the HTML. And then what is it saying? Features that are time sensitive or rely on information about the user would be more at the runtime level. So if you can avoid doing it at the runtime, if it's possible at all to do it at the static HTML, that's where it should be. But if you need to do it at the runtime and it's unavoidable, then you don't really have a choice, I guess. So that's a takeaway from this article. Next, in this Gatsby documentation, we're talking about build time versus runtime. So let's quickly take a look at some of these vocabularies here. So a common confusion with generation of static is difference between build time and runtime. So here, let's see, browser runtime. So the processes that happen in a web browser that you click through and interact can be referred to as a browser runtime, right? So when you're accessing the application in the browser, that would be the browser runtime when you can actually interact with the application. The build time, in contrast, refers to the process of using a server process to compile the site into files that can be delivered to a web browser later, right? So in this example, the browser isn't actually the logic wouldn't be in the runtime. It would be pre-built when the application is built. So it would all be like the static HTML pages. So that's a difference here. Understanding Gatsby develop runtime. So using Gatsby develop runs a server in the background, and it enables useful features like live reloading and Gatsby's data explorer. I think the live reloading that this is talking about is when you have it developed and you make the changes inside of the app to the existing pages, it does like a live reload. And here it's saying it's optimized for rapid feedback and extra debugging information. So the output of the Gatsby develop in a fresh install, we've seen this. And then Gatsby build, so the build time. So the difference, so when it's saying Gatsby develop, it's runtime. And then when you say Gatsby build, that's the build time. So if you do the build command, what this will do is create a version of your site with production ready optimizations and creates all the static HTML pages. So
I'd like to add something here.
yeah.
When he is talking about build time, there are two build times. One is even in development, there is a build time. When you are developing Gatsby develop, you say Gatsby develop, there is first a build time that it takes the data and builds the sites, and then it shows you in the browser, which is the runtime. Then when you basically say Gatsby develop, basically then there's no runtime. It just develops, builds the thing, and gives you the files which you deploy on CDN.
Okay. You mean Gatsby build, the second one?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the command which basically just builds the thing and builds the HTML thing.
Yeah. So what's the difference here? It's saying, oh yeah, were you saying?
Basically, it's saying there are two different commands. Once when you are developing, basically you say Gatsby develop. When you say Gatsby develop, it basically builds the application. There's a build time and there is a runtime. But when you say build, it doesn't do anything. It just builds the thing and gives you the HTML so that you can deploy on CDN.
The main advantage of Gatsby develop is when you are working on an application, you are trying and testing and you are changing your code quite frequently. So you don't need to stop a server and restart a server again and again. Gatsby develop just whenever you make some changes, it builds and it reloads your browser.
Live changes.
Yeah. Okay. So that, I guess we just covered this section here. What happens when you run Gatsby build? We just covered this, that it will build out the HTML static pages and then you can deploy it. Then it goes into bootstrapping.
No, we can go ahead.
We can move on, right? What's next here? Build time and client runtime data fetching. So in this guide, it's saying how to fetch data at build time versus runtime. And then most of the techniques are for custom data handling. So let's see, benefits of hybrid nature.
Right now, in this, we are not going to cover it. We are going to cover it later. Most probably, it will be Daniyal's turn. When we are doing content, right? Contentful, we will jump this thing.
I guess I have to do this one though. Creating and modifying pages here.
The easiest is this example is, Gatsby has the problem with Gatsby is all these companies is that what they try to do is not mention other people's products. They want the problem with Jamstack is most of the time you are using other people's products. It applies to Microsoft that they don't mention Google's products or AWS products. But when you are talking about Gatsby using React, which is not theirs. Gatsby using headless CMSs, which is not theirs. I'll just add to therefore, instead of looking at this, let's go back to the repository. I can make it much smaller.
You had these steps here, right?
No. Go to the code. The first thing is, can you scroll a bit? This thing is creating programmatically create pages. Programmatically create pages. Now this also confuses me because I've written it myself, but I did not know how to write it down in a much smaller way. The problem is, Zeeshan or Daniyal, when you talk about programmatically, the thing that comes to mind is that it is runtime.
Yes.
That is not the case. If you go, Adil, to Gatsby node.
This one.
Now this is where we and Daniyal got stuck. I remember.
Yes, sir. Exactly. I remember. I was just done using a React routing.
You were yes, and I just by chance I was searching for the same thing. Both of us were searching the same thing. Now you have to understand something. Right now we are not fetching data so that everybody understands and makes it very simple. Because my 20 years of teaching experience is that you teach people in very baby steps. If you teach too much at the same time, you get confused. Even the teacher gets confused. Who has the understanding? Students will get confused. Now, can you focus it on a little bit on the code, a little bit more?
Yeah, like this.
Now, Daniyal will first explain this thing, and then we will discuss it. What we are trying to do is, in this example, we are not taking data from a markup or data from a headless CMS. I'm just creating a page without any data, just hard coding the data. In the practical example, we will be getting data from a headless CMS or some other place. And but this thing, what is the name of the file? This name is Gatsby node. This runs at Zeeshan. When does it run? At build time.
At build time.
When it runs, I'm asking it. First of all, the API is a bit, as per me, screwed up. Why? Now look at this thing. Basically, you are taking action in the parameter and calling a create page on it. Daniyal, could you take forward from here?
Yes, sir. Exactly. Basically, what Gatsby is doing here. I just open it my file. Yes. Basically, as you guys can see here, actions.
No, just a second. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, create. Yes. From here, you guys can see export.create pages and async function. This is all Gatsby is providing us. And here, using this parameter, we are getting GraphQL and actions 2 parameter. In this one, you can see action, not GraphQL. Why? As Sir Zia explained and said, we are going with baby steps. So here is right now. Otherwise, just share the screen.
Sorry. Yeah, there we go.
No problem. Yes. So here you guys can see using this action, we are getting. We are getting a function or object, actions object from where? From Gatsby. And here actions object we are calling create page. As Sir Zia said, on the build time we create the dynamic pages, not on runtime. So whenever we run the command Gatsby develop or Gatsby build, first this Gatsby-node.js file will run, and whatever the pages we have to create, this file generated. And right now you guys can see here is we are getting one parameter action. So in this object we call create page, and then what we do, what we have right path object property path. So whatever we have, whatever we need the path of our page. So what we made it here, my dynamic page. And also this is, as Sarja said, a baby step. If we have a dynamic page and we don't know about the path, so what we will do, this is we will cover in next steps. Right now, here we write it hard coded my dynamic page. Then second property is component, and in the component, what component we want to create, in which component we want to send the data. We just create a template for that page, and here we call the required.resolve and just give the path of our component. So here we have a template with the name of dynamic page.tsx, and here you guys can see third parameter, third property is context. In the context, it's again an object. Whatever we will pass it here, we can get it in the component. So if we are passing the name Zia, so we can get in the component dynamic page component this name. Same thing, I'm just explaining further steps right now. Now you just guys assume we have a e-commerce website, and in the e-commerce website we have multiple products. Let's suppose we have a product sofa, we have a product bed, we have a product chair, table, multiple products. So just assume the data is entering. Whenever we write on sofa, definitely it will route in sofa page with the detail of that component. So how we can do that, and how we can create the dynamic pages using this node.js file, we can create the dynamic pages. Just assume here we pass my dynamic page hard coded. So what we will do, we will call the API, and we just pass the slug, whatever the URL is coming from the API, we will pass it here as a variable. Second thing, in the context, as Sir Zia hard coded, put it here Zia name. So what we will do here, we will just, whatever the data is coming from the API, we will pass that variable, the data from here, and we will get from our component. So if you guys want to see, I can also run the code and I can show you. If otherwise you want to continue, Sardia.
Yeah.
Daniel, go ahead.
So sir, I think I just go on Contentful, create the account and connect with Contentful. Am I right?
No, you don't need Contentful because you're hard coded.
It's hard coded, right?
Okay. Let me share my screen first. Yes, you can see.
Loading. Yeah.
Okay. This is our step 7. No, this is our step 6. Programmatically create pages. I just run this code and then explain it again. Do Gatsby develop.
Daniel, your setup is very tough. Remembering password, and most of the time I forget my own password.
Only we run Gatsby site. Okay, I'm not in the right path. Yes. Step 6. Sudo Gatsby develop. Using this command, we run the project. You guys can see here.
We will most probably we'll have to run npmi.
No, sir, I have already done that.
Okay.
Jan, I have already run. Here is our node modules. It will work.
Now what is doing? You can see this is build time. This is building the website. Given all the data, and it will go in the Gatsby node and basically get the data and building everything.
Exactly, yes. On this Gatsby develop command, basically first we have a running Gatsby-node.js file, and also whatever we have here in the pages. So what it will do, it will create the pages on build time, on compilation here. On this time, it creates the pages. So just now, It is still building the development mode. Once it's done, then I will show you.
All of you need a 8-core processor with 32 GB RAM.
No, I think when I share the screen using StreamYard, it is stuck. Otherwise, the whole day I'm running and working. It was working well. Maybe we need to update the system. Okay, now I just go. Perfect. Now you guys can see here, whenever I will go on this page, you guys can see here, I don't have this page here, my dynamic page. Now I'm going and paste it here. I'm just writing first a wrong name and enter it. So what it will show, Gatsby.js development 4.404 page. It means it doesn't exist. This page doesn't exist. But here in the pages, you guys can see. First, leave this first one. Second, about. Third, dash. And fourth one is slash. This pages you guys can see created about, dash, and index.tsx / home page. And fourth page is here, my dynamic page. This is from, we created Gatsby-node.js file. From here we created the page. Same thing if I want to make multiple pages. Let's suppose page 2 and pass the name Daniyal and save it. Okay. And one more thing you guys have to understand. Whenever you guys do changes in Gatsby-node.js file or Gatsby-config.js file, you have to rerun the server. Otherwise, changes will not reflect. So, Gatsby-node.js file, we are getting a object actions, and in this object we have a property of create pages. That is basically a function. Create page is a function which provided by Gatsby, and in this function again we can pass an object with multiple properties. First one is path. The path should be what page we want to develop. Here, let's suppose right now, as I gave the example of e-commerce, and we don't know about the path. Let's suppose when we click on sofa on in e-commerce website, so it will route in sofa page. So what we will do here, whatever the data we are getting from the API, we just pass as a variable. Just giving the example URL, and above we are getting the API data. Let's suppose here sofa from API, and we will pass it the URL here. So in this case, how much we have URLs? Let's suppose we have 50 products, so 50 URLs. So on the build time, we can create the pages dynamically. We don't need to create a page for sofa, for table, for chair. We can create all the pages using this create page functionality, which provided by Gatsby. And same thing below here, component. What component we want to render? When this page is created, we just pass the path and then we pass the component template. We just created a template, dynamic page template here. In the template, you guys can see here. This template we have created, and here we are getting page context object. So what we will get here, as I have already explained earlier, whatever the context we will pass, whatever the context, here we pass Daniel, here we pass Zia, and same thing according to the API. Let's suppose here is we have a URL and the getting data for sofa. So here we will pass the data variable which we are getting from the API. So the data related the product of sofa. So we will pass the data from here. So this is all we can do easily using Gatsby. And now I'm running. Just show you again. Now you guys can see here my dynamic page 1, my dynamic page 2, about that. Now I am going and click on my dynamic page. So here you guys can see what data we will pass from here we can get in the component. You guys can see page context, names here. So whatever the data we are getting dynamically from API, we pass it from here using variable. Simple thing. Just going back and just now click on page 2. Now you guys can see here. Now I'm getting the data of Daniel because I create another page and I pass the data here. So whatever I want, I can pass it from here. So this is how we can create the dynamic pages, but it is all create on this is all pre-rendered or pre-created pages. You guys can see, say when we build the command using Gatsby build. So this page is created on build time. Same thing when we create the Gatsby develop command. So this page is on the compilation time created. And the best thing you guys can see from here, just give a wrong path. Right now the server is not running. Just wrong path, put it here and enter it. Then you guys can see the pages, how many pages you guys have. Just building this.
I think we got it. Adil, could you revise the whole thing?
Yes.
With your American accent? Because all of us have got a Pakistani accent.
Okay, let me take the screen back here. Okay. I'm going to go back to this.
Because it's very important to understand that it is dynamic, it is build time, and initially it becomes very difficult to understand it.
Yeah.
Basically, if it's easy to understand that creating a dynamic page on build time.
Yes.
Exactly.
Let's say how Adil will express it in his American English.
So here's our project repo in GitHub. So here, when we're creating these dynamic pages for build time, we need a file here called Gatsby Gatsby-node.js, inside of which we have a asynchronous function here. So what we need in this node.js file is this is a function that would create all the dynamic pages, and this would be executed when we run the Gatsby build command, and it would build out all of the static HTML pages given a few different pieces of information. So if you look at this code again, so we're exporting create pages, and then inside of it we're passing actions. Inside of actions we have some different modules inside of it. So one of them is create page, and when we create a page, we can provide it a few different pieces of information. So first of all, the path. So in our Gatsby project, which URL location this newly created page would exist on, so that you could access that page. So here we've hard-coded the path, and this is like a relative path, so it would be after the index. So it would be whatever if you're running it on the local host, for example, it'd be /my dynamic page. So this would be how to access that page, and in this example, it's been hard-coded. As mentioned, we could access some third-party API here as well, which we'll do in the next step. Next information here is the component resolver here. So this is the template that would be used to create this page. And I think we can go to, if we go back to source, templates, and the dynamic page template here. So this is a simple TypeScript page, building a component here that returns some simple HTML. But here, if you look at it, it's accessing a variable here from the page context, and it's getting the name. So it's some data from the page context. And where is this coming from? If you come back now to the third piece of information here, the context. So inside of this, we can pass all the data that we need to access on the page or to display on the page. So for example, here the name is created here. So then the value is here. So this would be an example of a hard-coded data here because we have a hard-coded path as well. Again, if we were accessing a API, the URL would be here, and then we could access the data from the API in the context. And then this would be passed up to the template again, and then this is accessing the name. So we're getting the page context inside of as an input to this, and then accessing the name information from this context. And that's once this is all there, simply running the Gatsby develop or the Gatsby build command builds out that page, and then you can access it on this path.
Very nice, Adil. Now let's move to step number 7. Now in step number 6, we programmatically created a page. Remember, I was telling you, I and Daniyal wanted to programmatically create pages when we started developing in Gatsby.
Yes, sir.
And I came up with the solution step number 6, and Daniyal came up with the solution step number 7, which was creating dynamic routes. Now, both of them, we were stuck, at least I was stuck. I couldn't figure out what's the difference. Daniyal is telling me something which is working because what he had done is he has developed the code and pushed it on the Git. I am a bit slow. I was also developing. I had not pushed it to the Git, but mine was also working. Daniyal's was also working. And with our limited knowledge, we could not figure out what the hell was going on, why there are two different ways of doing exactly the same thing. What kind of design is this? Zeeshan, could you take step number 7 and go with it? And Daniyal will basically interject as we go along.
Sure.
Because these two examples, Daniyal, are very important.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
We want our students, all of the students, to understand what is happening.
100%.
Let me share my screen.
In the tutorial, Gatsby tutorial, they explain it, but they do it in such a convoluted way. Instead of explaining it, they're talking about so many things at the same page that they're not teaching us and there's no material, very limited material on the internet, and in the new book, there's nothing. So therefore, in the tutorials, Gatsby tutorial, the material is there, but it is with so much stuff that you don't understand what actually is happening.
So basically, what we need to understand is we need to Gatsby provides us, or the idea of Jamstack is to create site statically and deploy it on CDN so that your website can be accessed fastly. Your pages are pre-built, so they don't need to reconstruct or parse at the runtime or at the server side while you are requesting the. So that's why we were talking about all the time that it is being the pages are being built or parsed or developed at the build time. That's what we have discussed in last class, and that's what we have discussed in the previous step. The difference was in the previous step is that we are creating a dynamic pages, the page which is not exist initially, but it will be developed or created based on data. It is dynamic, but we'll do that at the build time, so that whenever your application is being built, so that it can be deployed on the production server, it will create pages, whatever pages you specified in Gatsby node file. So it will create those pages. Now what we need is sometime we need a routing. So we are creating multiple pages in routing, and these pages will be whenever you click on this particular page, your page will navigate to that particular page, and that's what it is already being built. But again, what you want is sometimes you need a routing which will be at the client side. So that means you will be creating a Gatsby application, which is, you are saying that static and pages are developed at the build time. But you also need some time routing at the client side, so that your pages being changed or developed at the client side. For that means you don't need them for the SEO, or you don't need them for to be developed initially. That maybe they are based on a client input or something. So that's why you need to develop it. You need routing at the client side as well. So that's what this step is about, the client side routes. And in this, as Sajja has mentioned, the article understanding client side route only, you need to understand this image. So that's how we have a home page, we have another page, or you can say app page, and then in that app page the routes that exist, which is client side routes. These are not the server side routes, or they are not a separate page being already built in build time. So these are the routes. So what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a page that let's say the app page, and we will have a routes inside those pages. So you can see here, if we look at this tab in SRC folder, we have pages. So we have three pages: index, app, and about. Index page is normal, as we have discussed today and in last class as well. That's a complete page. About page is again a same static page which will be built at the build time. App.tsx, that's where that's what you say something different for us at this moment. Whatever you have learned in React when we were building the routers or routing at the client side, that's the same thing over here we are talking about. Just it's a different router, the API of router. We have used React Router DOM. This is the Reach router. That's the only difference, but it's exactly what we have done with the Create Reactive client-side routing. So what this does is layout. That's a component we have already discussed. Here's the router tag, and what it does is it says base path equals /app, and it provides two other components. One is /page and another one is /. So we are creating a client-side routing based on /app/page1. So whenever user clicks /app/page1, it will show client page one component. If we only put the /app, it will display default components. So these two components are also there. So let me show this in code first, and then we'll write the code separately so that we can understand. And there is another input in the client node Gatsby node file. So we have this page app.js router client page one and default, where they are coming from. They are inside component. So client one, that's a simple component, there's nothing else. Default client, it's again a simple component, there is nothing else. So it just as we have done with the Create React app, just a different style of router. So /app/pages page one, and so it will be uh, /app/page one and then slash. The important difference here is we have Gatsby node again. Uh, so whenever we use the Gatsby node file, that means Gatsby has provided us few functions. The last one we have discussed, create pages. Those are the create pages when you want to develop pages on the build time. That's another function which Gatsby provide on create page. That's what Gatsby call it API, because we create these functions and Gatsby call these functions at the build time. So on create page, we provide few parameters, page and action, and there is a again create page exactly similar to the what we have done in previous step. Now the difference is we say page.path.match/app, and we provide a property match path to app. So what it's doing actually is, what we need is we need a routing at the client side, because whenever you click on the page, it tries to load the page which is the routing based on server. So what we need to identify Gatsby that we are doing a client side routing. It's not a server side routing. We need to identify Gatsby that it's a client side routing. So that's why we need to add the property page.match path/app. So whatever path coming after /app, that means it's a client side routing. So do not route at the what you say page level routing. Instead we need a client side routing. So let me uh, implement that. That's the old code we have done in the last class. So I'm picking code from over here, and I'll add these components in that page so that we can understand over here. So what we need to do is, the important thing is we have created page app.tsx. So we need a route, a base route. Inside that we'll be doing the client side routing. So we need initially a base route. So first of all, we need a page. Let's say, let me create a page name, what you say, home.js. And inside that, let me just take everything from here for now. Now we need this router, reach router. It's already available. So what I'll do is just sometime it does not import automatically, so we might need to copy.
As you guys know, my mind works in a random way. I was just thinking that if Adil would have gone to Texas instead of Washington, we will not be able to understand his accent at all.
Now you need to understand that after slash, we must specify the base path which should match from our main page inside which we are trying to do the client side routing. So we have created the base, a main page home. So I'll mention here home. And inside that I need few components. So what I'll do is I'll create a component, let's say my okay client1.js, client2.js, and I'll just add the default code in both of them. I'll skip the layout. Okay, so we have two components, and in home, what I'll do is I'll add client. If you remember routing, we were doing with the default React. We were providing the route and then path. So that's a different type of router, but it's doing this exactly same thing. So what we'll do is we'll provide path slash and say just slash. And for client 2, I need to provide client 2. We can also do client 2 over here, but at this moment, I just need to show you guys. 2. Okay, so client 2. Now we are done with the routing. We have created two components. We have created a page, and we must need to provide base path home, which is similar to our home.js, because the client side routing will be done in a particular page. That particular page will be displayed or as a static page, and then all the client side routing will be inside that page. So we have home page, so we have provided home. Now what we need to do is we need to
Zeeshan, there's a typing error there in the spelling on line number 4. The client to the path there, it's spelled.
Okay, just a moment.
No, line 3, client. You just wrote client. No, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a mistake in
Yes.
what you say file name. So
The file name, yeah.
I'll go with my
Again, in the component you see the file name CLIE and T2, and in the import / components you just check the spelling.
CL. Okay, CL.
Yes.
But
File
you have
name
to
as
fix the
well.
file
Yes.
name in the component.
From the left hand. Yes. Here.
Okay, I guess now it's done.
Change the name spelling again above.
Where?
It should be client 2 in the path, yeah.
Yes, perfect. Now it's okay. It's trying to.
Okay, so we are done with the routing. Now what we need to do is we need to add Gatsby node file. Inside that node file, we need A function. First, you need to understand it's in a function which Gatsby provide. So it should be as it is provided. Exports. You need to export a function with the name create page. And inside that, what we need a create page from function from action. That's also provided by the Gatsby. So we are accessing action, and in action we have a create page function. So we'll call create page function somehow and provide a page over here. But what we need to understand is we are parsing, we are trying to match if that page has a path. If the routing the URL has a app inside it, in our case, it will be home. If URL has home inside it, you just add the property dot match path so that it what it does is Gatsby understand that it's a client side routing and it's not the server side routing. So in our case, I'll make it home. Just removing the comments, we don't need it. I intentionally created the name home so that we understand that it must not always be app. Okay. So that's all. We are specifying a match path property inside the page, so Gatsby can understand that this is client side routing. And then what I'll do is
So, sir, what I understood so far, this is happening same thing as React doing. We have one
yeah,
index.html page.
whatever we have done with the client side rendering.
One we have an index.html page in React, and in the index.html we are implementing our components. So here is we have right now home page, and in the home page we are putting the components.
Yes.
I think by looking at one of the questions, Zeeshan, some people are getting confused by you are saying client 1, they are thinking this is client. This is client page 1, client page 2. This is not a client.
Client page 1. I can rename it. I just wanted to show the two routing at the client side. So that's why
you did it right, but some of the new students, they are getting confused that this is a client. This is not a client. This is a client page which is being developed on the client side. It is client side rendering.
Yeah. Okay, so if I'll go /home, it says client 1 client side routing, and if I'll go home /client 2, it says client 2 client side rendering. So the only difference what you need to understand is this is client side routing, and as you remember with create reactive client side rendering, we were developing a routing, and what we have constantly being explained from last two class that in client side rendering, all the React code comes to the client and it parts at the client side and it renders pages, it develops pages at the client side. So whenever you do routing, the routing happens at the client side. So pages develop at the client side. In case of build time, pages being developed at the build time in the process of building, and when you try to access those pages are already being parsed, and you can see these pages. Gatsby provides you the facility that you can also do the client-side routing. So you have a server-side, or you say static routing, and then you have a client-side routing, so that all these components will be developed at the client side. It will be rendered at the client side, being processed, parsed at the client side. So that's how you create them. What we can do is just give me a moment. Or let me go to the index page or stay at the home page. Two slash, or you can say slash home client one. And two home slash client two. Now you can see if I click on client one, it will update the. Just a small change, but you can view this, and you can also see the routing is also being changed. When I click the client one, it's a base route, and I click the client two, a route of client two. So you can work with these things, like let's say if I make it a client one route, and then I have to change it as well. Now, so you can see, but if I'll go for only for the home, it will not show anything below, because we are at the home base path. All the basic the client-side routing component are inside home slash something. So I'll click the client one, client two. That's how you do client-side routing with the Gatsby as well.
Daniyal, would you try to sum it up?
Yes, sir. So Zeeshan has already done very well. Same thing, I will explain it again. Basically, the client-side routing, what we have done in React, same thing is we are doing here. In React, we have a one index.html page, and on that page, we implement our components. Basically, here is we created the components, and here the home page, Sir Zeeshan created using the node file, that is basically HTML page. And in this, we are going to implement the components. And in the next class, I will show one example. I don't want to show here right now, because I know the students is in beginners level. One very important thing, I will share it in the next class related this. I think it's enough right now here, so student can practice, and then I will take maximum 5 minutes in the next class to show one more thing related the server side static files rendering and client side routes. When we will go and offline the internet, so how the component will work and how the static file will serve. So that is another difference between a client side routing and the server side render pages.
Okay, now let me sum up, and then Adil will sum up. Then we will go to the next step. The thing is, in React, you only had client-side rendering. All the JavaScript went to the client, and dynamically it got data from the server at runtime and built the page. The problem with that is twofold. The performance is not there because you have to wait. And the second thing is the search engine optimization. Because of that, what we are doing is we are using Gatsby. The advantage of Gatsby is that we are also using React components, but in a different way. Now we have two options: either to do client-side rendering as we did in the router as before, and the second thing is to do static page generation, which can be distributed on the content delivery network. Up to now, we have learned three types of pages. Number one is a page which is created by statically by just creating a file name page one or whatever about page. The second option is create a page dynamically in Gatsby-Node.js. The third way is through a dynamic router, a client-side router. So there are three ways the client can show a page. And depending on the requirement of your project, there are two ways to do it. Some companies, when they do dynamic, they build a completely create Reactive type of app. When they do client-side rendering, and when they do static, they do Gatsby. That's one way of doing that. For example, for static pages, you say www.panacloud.com, and there you deploy the Gatsby site. And on app.panacloud.com, you deploy the create Reactive type of website. Because in app.panacloud.com, you don't need SEO, and the performance is just hit is first just in the beginning. So therefore, but the other way is that we have a combined app with Gatsby, both dynamic and static. But it all depends on the requirements of the clients and what you want to do. Adil, could you summarize what's the difference between two and?
Yes. So as you were saying, we're looking at we've seen three different ways how we can develop these applications. One is where we build the actual HTML pages by hand. So we would have all the HTML markdown, and that page could be distributed, and it would be working fine with SEO. It would be easy to load. There wouldn't be too much problem anywhere. But in something like this, we wouldn't be able to have all these dynamically created pages. It would all have to be created manually by hand. So the second option we've looked at is this creating the pages dynamically at build time with Gatsby, in which we would have the template and the Gatsby Node.js file, and be able to create these pages at the build time, using the context and the markdown that we've seen in step number 6 in this video. The objective, the benefit of doing this is we are able to create pages dynamically, and those pages would be working well with the SEO. And once those pages are built, we can easily distribute them over the CDN, and the customers would be able to access it easily and without too much load on our servers. And then the third method we've seen is the client-side rendering, which we just saw in step number 7, which Zeeshan was doing, was using the router, the React router, as we've done previously with the Create React app as well. But the downside of this is we're not able to create those pages at the build time. These pages would be built, they would be rendered on the runtime on the user's browser. So the downside of this is you wouldn't have the SEO capability in it. But as you were saying, there's a lot of times where you don't really care about the SEO, because if it's like an internal facing, it's not an external application built for being able to be discovered on a search engine, then you don't really need SEO, right? So if you have if it's only meant for maybe students or maybe meant for your internal team, then you don't really care for SEO. And in that case, you can have the client rendering using the React router or Create React app, and we could do that just as easily with Gatsby as we saw in step 7. So These are the three methods we've seen so far uh, and it demonstrates the capabilities of building these pages in the build time or on the runtime.
Okay, now what we are going to do is just do one step more, because in the next class we want to start doing contentful. And Zeeshan or Daniyal, who is going to teach material UI?
Sir Zeeshan, if
Sorry.
you want to continue because you have already written the code, otherwise I will start it, no problem.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the material UI, let's move to the material UI component. Okay, so again, as we have seen material UI, the way we have worked material UI in the what you say with React, it's exactly similar. There is no difference. Just how do you need to add material UI plugin into the Gatsby app. So we have few what you say modules that we need to install over here. So npm install Gatsby plugin material UI. So we need a plugin for material UI. We need a material UI core module, and also we need a material UI MDI. So what we'll do is just install them. So meanwhile it's being installed, let's explore what's the difference we have in the source. There is nothing, there is no difference. Just we, as we have created the button or something for the, normally we create in React that the button from the material UI exactly will do the same, just create a button with the material UI. There's no difference. What we need to do in Gatsby config file, we need to add this plugin, Gatsby plugin material UI. So what it will does is it will add this plugin into the material UIs, and we can use that material UI component inside Gatsby. So meanwhile, it is being meanwhile it is being installed. What I'll do is
This is basically same material UI which we have done in React. Just we need to add the plugin in config file and just
yes,
install the dependency and use it.
yes. So just add the material UI plugin here, and you are done. You just need to in index.js. I'll add a button component from the material UI, but it definitely need to be installed. It's not already in my system, so that's why. Otherwise, there is nothing else. It's just everything. I guess it will take time. It was not already in the system. The only difference is we need to add inside Gatsby config with the Gatsby plugin material UI, and other than that, it's exactly the same we have used in the I'll show you the difference what to use it in the application.
I think
I
sir,
think
voice is breaking.
okay, we have more or less covered it, and time is also up. The students can complete it at their home because they have the code. It's no big deal. There's only two differences that you basically add a plugin and just import it. That's
Nothing
it.
else.
Nothing else. Now what we are going to do is we are going to finish this class. In the next class, we will do we will start doing step number
9.
step number 9, in which we will first learn contentful, how to basically, it's a headless CMS. What is a headless CMS? How to basically use contentful with Gatsby, how to get data at build time, and so on.
Yes.
So therefore, we will do all that in the next class. See you, all of you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. See you.
Bye.